Welcome back to the deep dive. It's really great to have you with us again.
Yeah, good to be here.
Today, we are unpacking a story that you absolutely think you know. It's a name, a brand you see in every single checkout aisle, every gas station, probably in your pantry right now.
Oh, for sure.
But if you peel back that wrapper, and the pun is absolutely intended, the story inside is so much darker and stranger and infinitely more complex than just a chocolate bar.
It really is. I mean, this is a story about crushing repeated failure. It's about a utopian social experiment that, against all odds, actually worked.
Right.
And it's about a man who fundamentally changed the definition of corporate responsibility before that was even, a concept that business schools taught.
We are talking, of course, about Milton S. Hershey, and the mission of this deep dive is to look way, way past the candy. We're going to explore how a man with a fourth-grade education—
Fourth grade. It's wild.
It's unbelievable how he revolutionized an industry, narrowly escaped sinking on the Titanic, and left behind this multi-billion-dollar legacy that, technically speaking, exists primarily to support a single school.
And that structure, that relationship between the company and the school, that is really the North Star for this entire discussion.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at a case study in what you might call industrial philanthropy.
Industrial philanthropy, I like that.
Yeah, and our sources cover everything. We're looking at his early struggles, his massive pivot from caramel to chocolate, his contributions to World War II, and then the legal intricacies of the trust he established, which is a whole story in itself.
And I have to say, looking at the research, one of the things I am most excited to get into is the story of the Ration D bar.
Yes.
This is a chocolate bar Hershey made for the Army that was specifically designed to taste
Deliberately unappetizing.
right.
It is a brilliant, if slightly cruel, bit of engineering psychology, and we will definitely get into the why of that.
I can't wait. But before we get to the war and the billions, we have to start at the bottom. I mean, we usually think of these Gilded Age tycoons, your Rockefellers, your Carnegies, as these, ruthless titans. Where does Hershey fit into that landscape? Was he cut from the same cloth?
That's the interesting tension, right? He was absolutely a capitalist. I mean, let's be clear. He wanted to dominate the market. He was competitive, but his software, if you will, was just programmed differently. He was born September 13th, 1857, in Derry Township, Pennsylvania. His family was Mennonite, Swiss, and German descent.
Okay, so that's a big deal. He's growing up in a community that values simplicity, pacifism, community welfare. That has to shape you.
It's crucial. He grew up speaking Pennsylvania Dutch.
Right.
And that background, it instilled this very specific work ethic and maybe more importantly, a sense of stewardship over wealth. But it did not give him a head start in business.
Right.
In fact, this is the underdog setup that really frames his whole life. His education was extremely limited. He stopped going to school after the fourth grade.
Let's just pause on that for a second. Fourth grade, we are talking about a guy who built a global empire, and he essentially never learned algebra or high school history or physics.
Nothing. He's done with school. In 1871, he's 14 years old, and his entry into the workforce isn't exactly, a rocket launch. He was apprenticed to a local printer, a guy named Sam Ernst, who ran a German-English newspaper.
A printer? That feels like a solid trade for that era. Stable. How'd he do?
He was terrible at it. Just awful. He was clumsy, he hated the work, he wasn't interested, and eventually he got fired.
Okay, so strike one. Fired from his first real job.
Precisely. So his family steps in. His mother, Fanny, who was a really strong influence his whole life, she suggests the candy trade. She arranges for him to apprentice with a confectioner, Joseph Royer, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And he spends 4 years there.
So he's learning the ropes. Sugar, temperature, timing, all of that.
Exactly. He's learning the craft. And this is what kicks off what I like to call his tour of failures. Because once he finishes that apprenticeship, he doesn't just settle down. He's got ambition. In 1876, he moves to Philadelphia to start his very first business. He's young. He's ready to conquer the city.
And Philadelphia in 1876, that's the Centennial Exposition year. The whole world is there. The city is booming.
It is. It's the place to be.
Yeah.
But the business fails. Completely collapses. He just can't make it work.
And he packs up.
He packs up. And this is where his persistence starts to look, bordering on masochism. He goes to Denver, tries to work there, learn some things. Then he goes to New Orleans, then Chicago. He's just wandering across a country that's incredibly economically volatile, looking for a foothold.
Wow.
Then in 1883, he lands in New York City. He gets some training at a place called Hyler's, which was a massive name in candy at the time. and he starts his second real business.
New York City. Okay, this is the biggest stage there is. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, right?
Good call. He didn't make it there either.
You're kidding me.
Nope. Initially, it does okay, but it only lasts for 3 years. By 1886, that business closes too. He's out of money again.
So let's just recap here. He's been fired from the printing gig. He failed in Philly during this huge national celebration. He's failed in New York City. He's traveled half the country, presumably burning through whatever capital or family loans he had.
All of it.
Most people would have just gone back to the farm and said, you know what? I tried. It's not for me.
And that's where the narrative usually ends for 99% of people. But there is a specific detail from his time in Denver during that wandering phase that is absolutely crucial. It is the technical aha moment that eventually changes everything for him.
What happened in Denver? What was the secret?
While he was working for a confectioner there, he learned a very specific technique, how to make caramel using fresh milk.
Fresh milk. Why is that the secret sauce? I mean, that seems almost obvious to us now.
In the late 19th century, it was not obvious at all. Most candies, especially caramels, use things like paraffin, basically wax, or other stabilizers to hold their shape and texture.
Yeah.
Using fresh milk was really, really difficult. Milk spoils, it scorches, it's hard to work with in large batches. It's temperamental.
Okay.
But if you can get it right, it makes the caramel so much creamier, it gives it a significantly better shelf life, and the flavor profile is just, it's completely different. It creates that rich, dairy-forward taste that we associate with good caramel today.
So he filed that knowledge away. Even though his own businesses were failing left and right, he kept that technical insight in his back pocket.
Precisely. He knew he had a superior product methodology. He just hadn't found the right market or the right business model to make it work. So, battered but not completely broken, he returns to Lancaster, Pennsylvania in 1883.
Back to where he started. Full circle.
Completely full circle.
Yeah.
And he decides to try one more time. He starts the Lancaster Caramel Company.
And this is where the tide finally turns.
It does. And it turns in a huge way. He applies that fresh milk method he learned out in Denver.
Mm-hmm.
The product is just strictly better than the competition. It's softer, it's tastier, it lasts longer on the shelf, and the company just explodes.
How big are we talking?
By the early 1890s, he has over 1,300 workers.
Wow.
He has 2 factories. He is exporting caramels in bulk to England. I mean, he is known literally as the Caramel King.
So he finally made it. He's wealthy. He's successful. He employs a whole town's worth of people. In any other biography, this is the happily ever after. He could have just coasted on caramel for the rest of his life.
He could have, absolutely.
Onion.
And this is where we see the visionary part of Hershey, or maybe just the restlessness in him. In 1893, he takes a trip to Chicago for the World's Columbian Exposition.
The famous Chicago World's Fair. This was the place where the Ferris wheel debuted, where electricity was really showcased for the first time on a mass scale. It was the future on display.
Right. And amidst all these incredible wonders, Tesla's AC current, the moving walkways, Hershey finds this one exhibit and becomes absolutely obsessed with it. It's a display of German chocolate-making machinery.
Not the chocolate itself, but the machines.
The whole process. You have to understand, at that time, chocolate was not a mass-market snack. It was a luxury good. It was largely dominated by the Swiss. It was dark, it was kind of bitter, and it was expensive. It was for the elite.
Right.
But Hershey looks at this machinery, and he sees the potential. He thinks, I can do this better, and I can do it for everyone.
He sees a democratization of luxury. He wants to take this thing for the rich and give it to the working person.
He does. And he reportedly made a comment that turned out to be incredibly prophetic. He said, caramels are just a fad, but chocolate is a permanent thing.
That is such a bold statement to make when you are literally the caramel king.
It's unbelievably bold.
Mm-hmm.
And he puts his money where his mouth is. In 1900, he does something that absolutely shocked his peers. He sells the Lancaster Caramel Company.
He sells the Golden Goose. For how much?
For $1 million.
Okay, we need to contextualize that number. $1 million in the year 1900.
It is an astronomical amount of money.
Yeah.
In today's purchasing power, especially if you think about it in terms of industrial capital, you're talking tens of millions, maybe even more. It's forget about work for the rest of your life. Money.
But he doesn't retire to a beach somewhere.
Not even close. He takes that entire fortune and bets it all on a brand new industry. Mass-produced milk chocolate.
Yeah, it is a massive pivot. It's like the CEO of a successful car company suddenly selling everything to go all in on, I don't know, hoverboards before the technology is even really proven.
It's a huge risk. And he knows he needs to build a factory, but not just any factory. He has to remember that lesson from Denver.
The fresh milk.
The fresh milk, that is his secret weapon.
Hmm.
He needs vast, unbelievable quantities of fresh milk to make his formula work on a mass scale.
So he can't just build this in downtown Philadelphia or New York. He needs to be where the cows are.
Exactly. He has to go to the source. So he buys a huge tract of farmland, roughly 30 miles from Lancaster, right near his birthplace in Derry Township.
Was that just nostalgia? I want to go home.
I think there was an element of that, for
Mm.
sure. But practically, it was a brilliant business move. It was the center of dairy farmland in Pennsylvania. He had direct, immediate access to the single most important raw material he needed. He essentially integrated his supply chain before vertical integration was, a standard business school strategy.
So he's got the land, he's got the cows. What about the chocolate itself? Is he just copying the Swiss?
No, he spends a lot of time perfecting his own formula. He wasn't just trying to replicate what was already out there. He wanted a specific taste that could be mass-produced, would remain stable on the shelf for a long time, and would appeal to the American palate. The first Hershey bar is sold in 1900.
And clearly people liked it.
They loved it. It was affordable luxury. For a nickel, a factory worker could enjoy something that just a few years earlier was reserved for the upper class.
And then he starts innovating.
Immediately. He innovates on the form factor. In 1907, he introduces Hershey's Kisses. In 1908, the Hershey bar with almonds. The business just scales and scales.
And as the factory gets bigger, he needs more workers.
A lot more workers. But he's out in the middle of dairy country. There's no housing. There's no infrastructure. There's nothing there.
So he has to build it all himself.
He has to build a town. And this brings us to the utopia part of his vision. You have to understand, in the late 19th and early 20th century, company towns were not a new concept, but they had a very, very bad reputation.
Right. When I hear company town, I'm thinking of coal mining towns or the Pullman district in Chicago.
Exactly. Pullman is the classic example. George Pullman built this whole town for his railcar workers. But it was incredibly rigid, it was paternalistic in a really controlling way, and ultimately it was exploitative.
The whole I owe my soul to the company store vibe.
That's it. They paid workers in script that was only good at the company store. Rents were high even when wages were being cut. It led to massive violent strikes. It was not a happy place.
So how did Hershey do it differently?
He took a radically different approach. He didn't want a labor camp. He wanted a real community. He had this core belief that workers who were treated well, who lived in dignity, and who had access to culture and leisure would be better workers and, better citizens.
Oh, what did he build for them? What were the basics?
He built comfortable houses with indoor plumbing and electricity, which were still luxuries for many at the time. He built businesses, churches, a whole transportation infrastructure with a trolley system to connect the town. But then he went way, way beyond the basics.
I'm looking at the list of things he built here, and it's kind of staggering. Hershey Park, the Hotel Hershey, the Hershey Theater, Hershey Gardens. It sounds like a resort, not a factory town.
It is. He built a full-blown amusement park so his employees and their families would have a place to picnic and relax. The theater he built was so grand, it brought in Broadway-level shows. In 1935, he established the M.S. Hershey Foundation just to fund culture and education for the residents of his town.
It almost sounds too good to be true. Was there a catch? Was this just, a clever way to keep unions out?
That's a fair question. And certainly happy workers are less likely to unionize. And Hershey was a businessman who wanted stability and no labor trouble. But the sheer level of investment suggests it was more than just a union-busting tactic. I mean, get this. He transferred the land for the Hershey Cemetery for $1.
$1.
$1. He wanted his workers and their families to have a dignified place to rest, even after they were gone. He was building a complete life cycle community.
It's incredible. But the town, as impressive as it is, isn't his biggest legacy. Not by a long shot. We have to talk about the school.
Yeah.
And to talk about the school, we have to talk about his wife, Kitty.
Right. Catherine Kitty Sweeney. He married her in 1898.
And this was a bit of a mismatch on paper, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Hershey was this frugal, pretty reserved Pennsylvania Dutch Mennonite. Kitty was an Irish-American Catholic from Jamestown, New York. She was bubbly. She loved society. She was vibrant. They were opposites in many ways. But by all accounts, they were deeply, deeply devoted to each other.
But there was a real tragedy in their marriage.
There was. They were never able to have children. And for a man who is building an empire, having no heir is a significant issue. It forces you to ask that fundamental question. Who is all of this for?
Right.
But beyond the business implications, they just genuinely wanted a family. And on top of that, Kitty's health was always very frail. She suffered from a debilitating illness, likely some sort of neurological condition that just got worse over time. She eventually died, quite young, in 1915.
That's heartbreaking. So no children to leave the fortune to. What do they decide to do?
Well, before she died, in 1909, they made a decision together that would define the company, the town, everything, forever. They signed a deed of trust establishing the Hershey Industrial School.
And what was the original purpose of the school?
It was for local white orphan boys. The idea was to give them a good home, a solid education, and a trade they could use to build a life. It started very small in the old homestead where Hershey himself was born.
So it was a nice charitable project, a good thing to do.
At first, yes. But here's the so what moment that I think just blows people's minds. In 1918, 3 years after Kitty died, Milton Hershey, who is now a widower with no direct heirs, he didn't just donate some extra cash to the school.
What did he do?
He transferred the majority of his personal assets, including the controlling interest in the Hershey Chocolate Company, to the Milton Hershey School Trust.
Wait. I want to be absolutely crystal clear on this. He gave the company to the school.
Effectively, yes. The trust he created for the school holds the majority of the voting shares of the Hershey Company. That means the school, which is now called the Milton Hershey School and is much more diverse, controls the company.
So let me get this straight. When I buy a Reese's cup or a Hershey bar today, the profits, or at least the voting power behind the company that's making it, are sitting with a boarding school for underprivileged kids.
Correct. The dividends from those shares are what fund the school. And the trust also controls 100% of the Hershey Entertainment and Resorts Company. So the hotel, the amusement park, the stadium, it's all owned by the trust for the benefit of the school.
That is just wild. I mean, usually you see billionaires setting up foundations that do good work, but they keep the business control completely separate. Or the foundation is just a tax vehicle. He literally married the business to the charity.
And he did it while he was still alive. This is key. He gave up control of his fortune in 1918. He lived until 1945. For nearly 30 years, he went to work every day for the company that was effectively owned by the school he created.
And what's the scale of this school today?
It's immense. As of the data we have from 2016, the school accommodates around 2,000 students from pre-K through 12th grade. It provides them with literally everything: housing, a top-tier education, clothing, medical and dental care, even college scholarships.
For free.
Completely free for the students and their families. It is, by a huge margin, the richest private school in the world, not because of tuition, but because of this massive endowment from the chocolate company.
Speaking of medical care, there's another huge institution in Hershey that came out of this, right? The medical center. And this involves a really interesting legal twist.
This is a fascinating legal story. So by the early 1960s, the chocolate company had been so successful for so long that the trust had accumulated an exorbitant amount of money.
A good problem to have.
An amazing problem to have. They actually couldn't spend it all just on the school without being incredibly wasteful.
Help! We have too much money. A problem most nonprofits would kill for.
Right. But legally, a trust has to follow the intent of the donor. It can't just sit on cash. So the board went to the Dauphin County Orphans Court, and they invoked a legal doctrine called CPRE.
The CPREs. That sounds French.
It is. It means as close as possible. Basically, it's a rule that says if a charitable trust can't fulfill its original, very specific intent, maybe because it has too much money or conditions have changed, the court can allow them to use the money for a purpose that is as close as possible to the original intent of the donor.
Okay, so what did they argue was as close as possible to an orphanage?
They argued that Milton Hershey's core intent was to help people, especially children, in his community. So they proposed a massive gift of $50 million to Penn State University to build a world-class teaching hospital and medical center. The catch.
Let me guess. It had to be built in Hershey.
It had to be built in Hershey, Pennsylvania.
A $50 million gift in 1963. That is a monumental amount of money.
It was one of the largest single philanthropic gifts in American history at the time. And that's how the Penn State Milton S. Hershey Medical Center was born. It's this elite teaching hospital in the middle of a relatively small town, all because the chocolate money overflowed the school's capacity to spend it.
It really speaks to the power of compound interest and a successful business model when it's tied directly to a philanthropic mission like that.
It does. It created this self-sustaining ecosystem of wealth and community care that is still running today.
Now, I want to pivot a little bit to some of the historical intersections because Hershey's life bumps up against some of the biggest events of the 20th century. And the first one is a story that just gives me chills every time I think about it, the Titanic.
It is one of those incredible what-if moments in history. So in 1912, Milton and Kitty Hershey were in Europe. They were traveling, possibly looking for medical treatments for Kitty, maybe just vacationing. They were booked to travel back to the U.S. on the maiden voyage of the RMS Titanic.
They actually had the tickets. This isn't just a rumor or a legend.
No, they had the tickets. In fact, the Hershey Story Museum archives have a copy of the check Milton wrote to the White Star Line. It was for the deposit on a first-class stateroom. It is a physical piece of evidence.
So why didn't they get on the boat? What happened?
Well, there's a common myth that they canceled at the last minute because Kitty suddenly fell ill. But the sources we have indicate she had been ill for years, so that wasn't a sudden change. The actual reason appears to be much more mundane.
Don't tell me it was a scheduling conflict.
It was basically a scheduling conflict.
Yeah.
Business matters came up that required Milton's attention back in Pennsylvania earlier than they had planned.
So just a simple, boring business matter.
Exactly. They canceled their Titanic reservation and ended up taking an earlier German liner, the SS America, instead.
The SS America. Wait, wasn't that one of the ships that sent one of the ice warnings to the Titanic?
It was. It's a very chilling connection.
But the butterfly effect there is just staggering if he gets on that boat.
The whole story changes. The chocolate empire might have crumbled or been sold off by executors. The school, which was only 3 years old at that point, might not have survived, let alone grown to what it is today.
The medical center definitely wouldn't exist.
Definitely not. Thousands of children over the last century would have had completely different lives. The town of Hershey might just be another blip on the map in rural Pennsylvania.
It is terrifying to think about. A simple business meeting altered the course of history for thousands of people a century later.
But he did survive. And because he survived, he was around for the next great global crisis, World War II.
Which brings us to the Ration D bar. You promised us the story of the bad-tasting chocolate.
I did, and this is such a great example of Hershey's pragmatism meeting, government bureaucracy.
Okay, set the scene for us.
It's the late 1930s. War is looming on the horizon. The U.S. Army approaches Hershey with a problem. They know chocolate is a high-energy food, and they need a durable ration bar for the troops. But they have very specific and, frankly, kind of contradictory requirements.
Okay, lay them on me.
Requirement number 1. It has to weigh 1 or 2 ounces. Simple enough. Requirement number 2. It has to resist melting at temperatures higher than 90 degrees Fahrenheit.
Which makes total sense. Troops would be fighting in the Pacific, in North Africa. Standard chocolate turns to soup at around 80 degrees.
Exactly. But here is requirement number 3, the real kicker. It had to have an unpleasant enough flavor to prevent the troops from just snacking on them.
Wait, I need to wrap my head around this. They went to the premier chocolate company in America and asked them to make chocolate that people wouldn't want to eat.
Precisely. You have to put yourself in the mindset of an Army quartermaster. These were emergency survival rations. They were meant for a situation where you're cut off from supply lines, maybe you're stranded behind enemy lines. If the bar tasted like a delicious, creamy Hershey bar, what would the soldiers do?
They'd eat it on day 1 as a treat.
Of course they would. And then when they were actually starving 3 days later, they'd have nothing left. The Army needed to save the soldiers from themselves.
That is some dark, pragmatic logic. Make it gross so it saves their life.
It worked. Hershey's chemists got to work on it. They developed this new formula that used oat flour, sugar, cocoa butter, skim milk powder, and some artificial flavoring. It was dense. It was hard as a rock.
How hard are we talking?
We're talking so hard that the official instructions suggested it was best to shave slices off it with a knife. Soldiers reportedly hated it. They had nicknames for it, like Hitler's secret weapon, because it was so tough to chew.
But did it do the job? Did it meet the requirements?
It did, perfectly.
Yeah.
It provided 600 calories in a tiny, stable package. It didn't melt in the jungle heat, and it kept men alive in the worst possible conditions.
How many of these brick-flavored bars did they end up making?
The production numbers are just staggering. In 1939, the plant could produce about 100,000 bars a day. By the end of the war, the Hershey plant in Pennsylvania was churning out 24 million bars a week.
24 million a week.
The logistics of that alone are mind-boggling. I mean, getting the cocoa, the sugar, the packaging, all during wartime rationing. All told, it's estimated they produced over 3 billion Ration D and tropical chocolate bars during the war.
Wait, hang on. What's the tropical chocolate bar?
Well, after a year or two of soldiers complaining bitterly about the Ration D, the Army decided they could be a little bit nicer. So in 1943, they commissioned the tropical chocolate bar. It was still designed to resist melting in tropical heat, but it was formulated to taste somewhat better than the Ration D.
That's a low bar to clear, pun absolutely intended.
A very low bar. But Hershey's contribution wasn't just chocolate. The factory's own machine shop, the guys who normally maintained the chocolate rollers and wrapping machines, was actually converted to make parts for tanks and other military hardware. They made gun mounts. They made parts for the Navy.
It's amazing to picture a chocolate factory making tank parts. It really just shows the total mobilization of the entire country for the war effort.
It really does. And for all of this, the company received 5 Army-Navy E-Production Awards for excellence in production.
And Milton Hershey was there for all of it. He was an old man by then, but he saw his little caramel company transform into a genuine war machine.
He did. But as the war was ending, so was his life.
Yeah, let's talk about the end of that era. He lived a very, very long life.
He did. He died on October 13th, 1945. He was 88 years old.
And fittingly, I think, he died in the very hospital that he had helped make possible.
In Hershey, Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
of course. And he was buried in the Hershey Cemetery, the one he built and gave the land for, right next to his wife, Kitty, and his parents, who had also been moved there.
It's a very poetic end. He is literally surrounded by the town and the community that he built from scratch.
And if you go there today, there's a statue of him at the Milton Hershey School. It's this bronze statue of Milton with an orphan boy kind of wrapped in his arms.
Yeah.
And the inscription is really powerful. It says, "His deeds are his monument. His life is our inspiration."
His deeds are his monument. I like that a lot. He didn't build a giant pyramid for himself. He built a school and a town.
And the recognition continued even after his death. In 1995, the U.S. Postal Service issued a stamp honoring him as a philanthropist. And of course, every year on September 13th, his birthday, people all over the world now celebrate International Chocolate Day.
So let's try to bring this all together. We've covered the failures, the chocolate revolution, the utopian town, the incredible trust, the Titanic, the World War II bars. What does this all mean for us today? What's the big takeaway?
I think the key takeaway, the thing that is so unique, is the structure he left behind. You know, we live in this era of massive wealth accumulation. We see billionaires pledging to give their money away, which is great. But Hershey didn't just pledge. He structurally bound his wealth-generating engine, the company, directly to his philanthropic mission, the school.
Right. It wasn't a one-time check. It was a perpetual motion machine for charity.
Exactly. As long as people around the world eat chocolate, the school is funded. And he did this while he was still alive. He gave up control of his fortune decades before he died.
It really comes down to that concept of enough. He reached a point where he must have said to himself, I have enough. I have more than I will ever need. Now what can this wealth build for someone else?
And that's the provocative question, isn't it? In a world where the goal is so often just endless growth for the sake of shareholders, the Hershey model is a fascinating anomaly. It asks us, what if the ultimate shareholder was the community? What if the profit motive was harnessed directly for social good, not just as an afterthought or a tax write-off?
That is a powerful thought to leave on. I guess next time you grab a Hershey bar or a Kit Kat or Reese's, you can remember, you aren't just buying a snack. You're feeding a trust that educates thousands of kids. And you're validating the dream of a fourth-grade dropout who just refused to let failure stop him.
A pretty sweet legacy at the end of the day.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll see you next time.